Welcome back to more FPL content. This will be my team selection for Game Week 10. I've got 2 free transfers and a lot of different avenues which could involve buying Salah back for a -4 hit for free, or possibly just going in a different direction as discussed in my transfer plans video very recently. Check out all the other content for Game Week 10 like the transfer tips and also the best wildcard squad, and of course the deadline stream is headed your way on Saturday morning, so be sure not to miss it by smashing the like button and subscribing to the channel. Our aim is to get this video to 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships, the Discord server, FPL League. Also check out Drafthound, which is a great resource I will show you later, and also Spotify. Without further ado, let's jump straight into it. If you want to see the full review for Game Week 9, then check out the transfer plans video I published very recently. But to summarize, I got 65 points in Game Week 9 and I've got 540 overall. My rank went up slightly from around 1.6 million to 1.3, so a small green arrow. It was looking great after Friday night when Chris Wood scored a brace, but afterwards there were some issues, especially on the Sunday, and ultimately only one player in my defensive line produced a return, in Rico Lewis. Mbeumo and Palmer did the business, but Foden and Rodgers were very disappointing, especially considering I sold Saka to Foden to really target the next 3 fixtures in particular. Solanke has been very underwhelming recently, and Erling Haaland scored after 5 minutes against Southampton, but wasn't able to produce more than that for those that triple captain him, so I'm very happy I played the chip back in Game Week 2 when he scored a hat-trick against Ipswich Town. He really should have done the same thing here with the chances he had against the Saints. But let's now move on to Game Week 10 and talk about my transfer plans for the upcoming deadline. There were some positive updates about Arsenal by Mikel Arteta in his recent press conferences. Jurriën Timber is available and he played 45 minutes against Preston North End in that 3-0 victory in the Carabao Cup. And also Martin Odegaard is very close to return. There's even an outside chance he makes the squad against Newcastle tomorrow, but I think more likely we'll see him against Inter Milan in the Champions League and subsequently Chelsea in Game Week 11. But David Raya has been a major disappointment on the wildcard. I still believe he'll get the most points of any goalkeeper this season and get a lot of clean sheets, but it's been a very shaky start for those that wildcarded him in Game Week 6, and that's no returns since Game Week 4 now for Arsenal defenders and David Raya, of course. The only exception really to that rule would be Gabriel, who scored in Game Week 5 against Man City. But other than that, I think Raya has a lot more to offer than what he's showing, and at 5.6 million, he needs to get his act together. Otherwise, I think it's a very simple downgrade to a cheaper goalkeeper. As mentioned in recent podcasts, there's a great chance I'm going to make a defender transfer in the next few weeks. It's just a matter of when and which specific game week do I pull the trigger, and do I want to make a downgrade to then upgrade the midfield or forward line, for example. But Rico Lewis played 90 minutes against Tottenham Hotspur in the Carabao Cup, and Pep Guardiola said he would like to rest him, but he has no option than to play him because Kyle Walker is out, and also Man City are decimated by injuries at this moment in time. They can still put out a strong 11 against Bournemouth, but they might not have much in terms of players coming off the bench and making a real impact. So it looks like Rico Lewis is in the clear, but sometimes Pep Guardiola can be a funny man, that's to put it quite lightly, and he can still go for something you don't expect. So don't count your chickens just yet with Rico Lewis. There is still a chance he is benched. I'm just going to start him in the hopes that he does get the start, of course, and can get a clean sheet against Bournemouth away. My second defender could be Aït-Nouri, and this would mean downgrading Gabriel to fund another move in a different position. But there is a positive update about Gabriel, which has been provided by Mikel Arteta, and he said if he can complete the training session today, on the Friday, he will be in the squad, and that is to be expected. So it's looking very positive about Gabriel, but sometimes with Arteta, he says one thing in terms of injuries, and then the complete opposite happens. So take that with a pinch of salt, but several reliable sources indicated that Gabriel was in contention to play against Preston North End, but he was obviously not risked. So I believe he will start against Newcastle, and that's why there is definitely a case to hold Gabriel in the long term. But Aït-Nouri is facing Crystal Palace. The only downside to buying him is that he's 1 yellow card away from suspension. So by buying him for Gabriel, I might still need to make another defender transfer because I've got Van den Berg and Jacob Greaves still in my setup. But my final defender in the starting 11 would be Mykolenko away to Southampton. I think Everton can still concede in this fixture, but I think Mykolenko looks great on paper, and if you're looking at all the teams and their probabilities of a clean sheet, I think Everton will be right up there with the odds. But I'm going to play him and hope for the best here. Michael Keane or Branthwaite, who's going to start? I think it will be Branthwaite if Everton go for a back four again, but there is the odd chance they switch to a back five, especially if several players like McNeil are out. And there are some reports that McNeil hasn't been spotted in training, so that's definitely one to monitor for those that own him. And it's a big shame because he was, up until this point, the best budget midfielder in the game. You might be wondering, why would you sell Gabriel when there are positive updates about him? Well, it would mean buying Salah back for Phil Foden, and this would be a set of aggressive transfer moves to really attack this game week and also have the structure in place that I want in the long term. And Mohamed Salah is the best FPL asset at this moment in time, although you could make a case that Cole Palmer is equally as good, if not even better, simply because of the value. But I think a lot of people will kind of shift towards this structure with Salah, Palmer and Saka, and that could mean selling Erling Haaland very soon, and I'll discuss this later on in this video. But I think he's a captaincy contender, and the same goes for Cole Palmer, who'll be facing a Man United side with a new manager technically in Ruud van Nistelrooy, who was the assistant under Ten Hag, and now he is the interim head coach until Ruben Amorim is appointed in a few weeks' time. That is the latest rumour, and of course the latest news we're getting, but I think these two are definitely in the captaincy conversation in Game Week 10, but also in the upcoming game weeks, especially when they both have those fixture swings in a positive sense and have a great fixture run until the end of the year. Particularly in Chelsea's case, I would argue if you're buying one right now, I'd go for Cole Palmer, although admittedly, I think Salah might be the better captaincy option in Game Week 10. My third midfielder would be Morgan Rogers away to Tottenham. The fixture doesn't look great on paper, but I think the way Spurs play could really fall into Aston Villa's hands, and they did win here last season, although Spurs did batter them in the recent meeting at Villa Park. But I don't expect something like that to happen. I think there'll be a lot of goals from both sides. We could see a thrilling 2-2, maybe a 3-2 either way, and Morgan Rogers could be heavily involved. His away record has been very impressive recently, especially in the Premier League. And my final midfielder would be Mbeumo away to Fulham. He got a double-digit haul last season at Craven Cottage, but it's not an easy stadium to go to in the last year or two because they've been getting a lot of big results against the big sides like Arsenal, and it wouldn't surprise me if Fulham could maybe limit Brentford in terms of chances and keep it quite low scoring. But Brentford are a bit of a bogey team for Fulham. In the last two meetings, they've kept 2 clean sheets. They got a 3-0 victory at Craven Cottage, and I think Mbeumo is one of the best midfielders in the game. By selling Foden and Gabriel, it would allow me to keep Erling Haaland whilst buying Salah in my ranks. So ultimately, it would be free transfers being made to kind of fund this sort of structure. But there is the case to sell Erling Haaland, spread the funds around, maybe not take hits, and still buy the likes of Salah and keeping Cole Palmer in the process. I still believe Haaland is a great captaincy option for the next couple of weeks, facing a Brighton side potentially without Lewis Dunk in Game Week 11, and Bournemouth are still there for the taking, I think, for Man City, despite their injury woes, and I could see them scoring 2 or 3 goals in this game. And I think Erling Haaland missed 3 big chances last season at the Vitality Stadium, so on another day, he would have gotten a brace or a hat-trick in that particular match. If he gets those chances again, he might end up converting them this time. He had an incredible start to this season, but has faltered since Game Week 5, so you would expect much more from Erling Haaland, and I personally think he's still worth holding on to, but there is definitely the case to sell him and spread the funds around. That's something I've been discussing for several weeks now, and I always knew if he blanked against Southampton or didn't do too well, I think the narrative would be Erling Haaland is the one to sell right now, especially with Man City having tough fixtures on paper. My second forward would be Cunha, and the one making way would be Dominic Solanke, who faces Ipswich Town at home in Game Week 11, so you could argue the timing is a little bit off, and ideally you'd keep Solanke until Game Week 12, but I think Cunha is the better option from now until, I'd say, Game Week 20, when Wolves are top of the fixture difficulty rating. They're facing Crystal Palace at home. This could be a low-scoring game, but then you've got him in place against Southampton in Game Week 11, another home match, and I think Cunha could get a goal and maximum bonus points, and perhaps he could get 2 or 3 goal contributions in certain matches. But I really like Cunha because of the bonus points. He could easily get you 7-9 points on a consistent basis, and he's had a solid start to this season, despite the fact that Wolves are bottom of the Premier League table. And finally, I've got one yellow flag player in this starting 11 with Chris Wood, who is still a doubt, according to Nuno Espirito Santo. He said all the players that have had knocks in the last couple of days are still a doubt, and they'll be assessed heading into the weekend. But I think Chris Wood will play. He himself said that he should be fine. It's not a serious injury. You can't really judge what players say about their own injuries too much, but I don't think it's anything serious. I think he's going to play, and with the form he's in, I can't see Nottingham Forest really chancing it and either benching him or leaving him out entirely unless there's a risk of aggravating the injury. It's a home game against West Ham, and last season Nottingham Forest won this by a scoreline of 2-0 with Awini scoring when Chris Wood missed out. The bench is still important in FPL, although not to the same extent as UCL Fantasy. Check out my UCL Fantasy videos very soon, the best wildcard, limitless, and team selection videos, alongside the deadline stream, of course. But I've got Valdimarsson, Semenyo, Vandenberg, and the red flag Jacob Greaves on my bench. He should be available after the next international break, but he's been a terrible FPL asset this season. He's only 4 million after all, but I don't see Ipswich Town keeping many clean sheets. I'd be surprised if they kept more than 5, to be fair. But Greaves does have the attacking potential. We'll see if that comes into play when he returns, but I still need to make another defender transfer even after buying Aït-Nouri, and if he gets booked before Game Week 19, which is very likely, I definitely have to reshape my defensive line. Rico Lewis is not the most nailed on once Kyle Walker and these other injured Man City players return. Mikolenko's fixtures turn for the worse in Game Week 15 as well, so there are some teething issues with this setup, despite taking a -4 hit potentially and buying Aït-Nouri, Salah and Cunha, whilst displacing the likes of Gabriel, Foden and Solanke. Let me know down in the comment section below if you would make those transfers. And in terms of the captaincy, I would go for Salah if I end up buying him. This is what I'm leaning towards at the moment, but I have to stress this is not absolutely locked in, and I'll talk about my final transfers in the deadline stream on Saturday. It's going to be kind of a mixture, or either what you see here, an aggressive set of transfers, taking a -4 hit potentially and buying Salah, or rolling the transfer and having 3 available for Game Week 11, and perhaps, if I can hold my nerve, have 4 transfers in Game Week 11, or should I say Game Week 12, when we go into another international break. So essentially, I'd have a bit of a mini wild card in a game week where a lot of people will be playing the chip if they haven't already. Haaland will be my vice. I'm a bit less keen on Cole Palmer with Erik ten Hag being sacked. I think if he had stayed, Cole Palmer would be right up there for me in terms of the captaincy, and he still is technically, but I'm not as high on him as I would have been if they didn't make that managerial change. So that's my current setup and transfer plans, but I haven't made a single transfer yet, so I have lost out in terms of some players dropping in price, like Gabriel to 6.2 million, and Aït-Nouri went up to 4.6 million several days ago. But let's now head over to other websites like FPL.team to visualize different transfer plans, and not just in Game Week 10, but also in future game weeks. I'll show you a sneak preview of Game Week 11 with these transfer plans, but I wanted to show you the predicted points, which is 53.7 with the free transfers of Aït-Nouri, Salah and Cunha. And if I captain Erling Haaland instead, the predicted points goes up to 54.2, so overall it would be 50.2 with the -4 hit taken into account. If we then go to Game Week 11, I could actually roll, but I would be tempted to make certain transfers like Semenyo to Garnacho, as Man United have really good fixtures over the next 3, but by making the 3 previous transfers, I'd only have 0.2 million available, so it would probably require another -4 hit if I wanted to make such a move, and therefore I probably could see myself rolling if I end up taking the hit this week and then having 2 available in Game Week 12 after another international break. The expected points is also 56.4. I'd also have the likes of Salah and Haaland as part of my captaincy dilemma, but I also want to show you a different strategy to buy Salah, and that involves selling Erling Haaland and only making 2 free transfers instead of taking a hit. So I'd keep Dominic Solanke and Gabriel, and the ones making way would include Semenyo, and I think that massively boosts my midfield, so buying Salah for him, and also Cunha for Erling Haaland. If you prefer this over the transfer plans I showed you earlier, then let me know down in the comment section below. I'd be very interested to see your thoughts. And the expected points is only 50.3, but of course there's no hits being taken, so it technically would be higher than what I showed you previously, but not by much. It's literally identical. However, I think the big differences could lie in Game Week 11 and what FPL.team kind of suggest in terms of predicted points by that stage. But having Raya and Gabriel as part of that defensive double up for Arsenal away to Newcastle doesn't look great on paper, but I see that game as being low scoring, and it wouldn't surprise me if Arsenal kept a clean sheet at St James's Park. Rico Lewis and Mikolenko would be part of the backline, so no Aït-Nouri against Crystal Palace and then Southampton, but I'll show you very soon another possibility for me to buy him, of course, in Gameweek 11. Mbeumo, Palmer, Foden and Salah is a very strong midfield, and I do have 2.7 million in the bank to then buy Saka for Phil Foden whilst making other upgrades, especially in my defensive line. I'd still have Dominic Solanke, and if I end up keeping him in Gameweek 10, I will definitely hold him against Ipswich Town, and ultimately I'd start looking to sell him by Gameweek 12. Cunha and Chris would complete the starting 11 with Valdimarsson, Rodgers, Vandenberg and Greaves on my bench. I'm not even too far off doing something like Greaves to Trent Alexander-Arnold or any Liverpool defender essentially, but of course if I go to Trent, it would price me out of buying Saka back for Phil Foden. Let's now discuss Gameweek 11, and I could buy Nuri by that stage, benching the likes of Vandenberg and Mikolenko, but suddenly I've got more defensive depth by selling the injured Jacob Greaves, and the only issue here is if Nuri gets booked, he will be suspended, but only for one match, and I still think it's a great long-term acquisition with Wolves' fixtures until Gameweek 18 essentially, and I'd have David Raya and Gabriel away to Chelsea, Rico Lewis and Nuri. I don't think Lewis looks particularly great against Brighton. I think they'll probably concede in that game, but I think if he gets the starts, that's pretty much the most important thing. I could always maybe start one of Mikolenko Vandenberg instead, but I don't see myself doing that. The predicted points is 53.3. Mbeumo, Palmer, Foden and Salah will be a very strong midfield once again. Solanke, Cunha and Chris up front. And by Gameweek 12, that's when I could start to buy the likes of Saka back into my setup and then have this very strong team and 1.3 million left in the bank after making these transfers. So let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. It would mean selling Erling Haaland, and he's got some great fixtures coming up. Even Tottenham at home could be a great fixture for Erling Haaland himself, but ultimately you have to stomach it when you do sell a quality player like Salah or Haaland, and I've done that this season with Salah on the Gameweek 6 wildcard, and it didn't pay off, especially in terms of the timing. Let's now head over to Drafthound and see what they're suggesting for my team at this stage of the game week, and also some of their different tools and algorithms. As always, there is a link in the description below for Drafthound. I'd highly encourage you to check it out if you haven't already, and many of you are signing up using my link and talking about how useful the website is, but also how fun it can be to use the different tools. Now, for my own setup, they're recommending Rodgers and Solanke out for Diaz and Welbeck, and I personally think Welbeck is a great suggestion, maybe not for the next 2 game weeks, but once Brighton's fixtures turn in Gameweek 12, he is one of the best budget forwards in the game, and by that stage, you'd rather go for Welbeck than Wissa, with Brentford's fixtures turning for the worse around Gameweek 15. They're also recommending Rodgers and Haaland out for Salah and Jackson. I have to say, that is an incredible suggestion, but my preference would be to sell Semenyo instead and keep in Morgan Rodgers, despite the fact that Bournemouth have better fixtures over the next 3-4 game weeks compared to Aston Villa, and they also recommend Greaves and Solanke out for Nuri and Jackson. So just like I discussed in my Transfer Plans podcast, I think their second and third suggestions are probably the best, and I don't think their top one this week is probably my favourite personally, although Welbeck is a great shout up front. And in terms of the optimization tool, nothing has really changed from that podcast when I kind of changed things up a little bit with this feature. So Palmer is the recommended vice captain and Haaland as the captain. This is with my current setup though, and making no transfers whatsoever. Would you actually make transfers in my case? And if so, would you take the -4 hit or possibly sell Erling Haaland and make 2 free transfers, which makes it possible to have Salah and Saka by the time we get to Gameweek 12, whilst also keeping Solanke for the next 2 game weeks. There's so many different ways to play FPL, especially this season with the pricing and also the ability to have 5 free transfers. That's something I do like about FPL this season. And also just want to show you very quickly the fixture analysis tool by Drafthound, and the likes of Man City and Arsenal do rank very highly over the next 5 game weeks, and currently it is toggled to clean sheet odds. And some things do change if I then maybe modify this to chance of scoring 2+ goals. Liverpool go top against Brighton. Despite having a tough fixture on paper, it is still a game where Drafthound back Liverpool to score 2 or 3 goals, and Salah is therefore one of the best captaincy options in Gameweek 10. Thank you very much for watching this video and listening to this podcast. If you enjoyed it or found it useful, then be sure to smash the like button and subscribe for new. Our aim is to get this video to 200 likes and to keep on pushing towards 35 subscribers and beyond. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, DylanRCM, and check all the other links in the description below for my Patreon and the championships For early access to my videos, I'm explaining other perks, the Discord server, FPL League, Drafthound, as well as Spotify. Leave a 5-star review on my podcast and follow me on Spotify. It would go a long way supporting my channel. I wish you all the best of luck for Game Week 10 and the rest of the season, and I'll see you next time.